Welcome to Ted's Story Corner. Tonight's story is called The Bookseller Who Remembered Everyone. Find a cozy spot, settle in, and let's begin. On a quiet street where the trees leaned toward each other like old friends sharing secrets, there stood a bookshop called The Printed Leaf. Its windows were small and round, like the portholes of a ship that had sailed through time and decided to rest here. Ivy curled around the doorframe, and a brass bell chimed softly whenever someone entered, a sound like a single raindrop falling into a still pond. The shop was owned by a man named Elias Crane. Elias was 73 years old, with silver hair that stuck up in the back no matter how many times he smoothed it down, and spectacles that perched on the end of his nose like they were afraid of commitment. His hands were soft from handling pages. His voice was warm as honey, and he had one peculiar gift: he never forgot a book he'd given to anyone, not the title, not the reason, not the expression on their face when they took it home. Mrs. Patterson, who came every third Tuesday, had once mentioned she missed the lavender fields of her childhood in Provence. Elias had placed a slim volume of French nature poetry in her hands, and for 3 years, she'd returned to thank him. A young man named Leo had stumbled in during a thunderstorm, soaked and apologizing. Elias had handed him The Little Prince without explanation. Leo now visited every month, and always sat in the same chair by the window to read. There was no computer in Elias's shop. No system of inventory or algorithms. Just shelves, and a mind that arranged itself like a library of human hearts. But something was happening to Elias. It began with small things. The name of a tea he'd drunk every morning for 40 years. The day of the week. Whether he'd already fed the stray cat that waited by the back door each dawn. He laughed it off at first. Just age, he told himself. The mind is a shelf that gets a bit crowded. But then came the morning he couldn't remember which book he'd promised to hold for Mrs. Patterson. He stood in the back room, surrounded by boxes, his hands trembling slightly. He knew it was something about gardens. Or perhaps birds. Or maybe it was the poetry again. He closed his eyes, trying to find the shape of the memory, but it slipped away like water through fingers. For the first time in his life, Elias Crane felt afraid. The cat, a ginger tom with a torn ear, meowed at the door. Elias opened it, and the cat wound around his ankles, purring. Elias knelt down, his old knees protesting. "You still remember me, don't you?" he whispered. The cat blinked slowly. Over the next weeks, Elias tried to hide his confusion. But customers began to notice. He gave Mrs. Patterson the wrong book, a collection of essays on beekeeping instead of the garden poetry she'd been waiting for. She smiled kindly and took it anyway. But when she left, her steps were slower. He forgot to put out the fresh scones that he'd baked every Saturday for 20 years. The brass bell still chimed, but the sound seemed heavier somehow. Then, one afternoon, Leo arrived. The young man sat in his usual chair, but he didn't open a book. Instead, he watched Elias wander the aisles, muttering to himself, "Mr. Crane?" Leo said gently. "Are you looking for something?" Elias turned. Startled. His eyes were watery behind his spectacles. I'm looking for the book I was supposed to give someone. A young woman. She came in last week. Or was it the week before? She had a photograph." Leo stood up. "A photograph, a picture of a lighthouse. She said her grandfather used to take her there. I promised I'd find her a book about lighthouses. But I can't remember where I put it." Leo walked to the shelf where Elias kept the travel books. He ran his finger along the spines and pulled out a slim volume with a faded blue cover. "Beacons of the Northern Coast, this one?" Leo asked. Elias's face crumpled with relief. Yes. Yes, that's it. Leo handed it to him. You told me once, Leo said, that a bookseller doesn't just sell books. They sell the right book to the right person at the right time. Elias nodded slowly. So maybe, Leo continued, it's okay if you need help finding them now. Maybe that's what we're here for. The next morning, Elias arrived to find a small wooden box on his doorstep. Inside was a stack of index cards and a note in Leo's handwriting, for when the shelves get crowded. Elias carried the box inside. He sat at his desk, the ginger cat curled at his feet, and began to write. He wrote about Mrs. Patterson and the lavender fields. He wrote about Leo and the thunderstorm. He wrote about a young woman named Clara who loved lighthouses. He wrote about a boy who came in every Saturday to read comics while his mother shopped, and who now sent postcards from places Elias had never heard of. Each card became a small anchor. Not to replace his memory, but to hold it gently. Like a bookmark in a well-loved book, and something unexpected happened. Customers began to add their own cards. Mrs. Patterson left one that said, "This shop smells like hope." The ginger cat got a card, founder and CEO of Napping. No one knew who wrote it, but everyone smiled. A young mother wrote, "My daughter learned to read in the corner by the poetry section." Elias pinned them to a corkboard behind the counter. Customers started gathering there, reading the cards, adding their own. Strangers became neighbors. Neighbors became friends. One afternoon, the young woman with the photograph returned. Her name was Maya. Her grandfather had been a lighthouse keeper, she explained. He had passed away last spring, and she'd been searching for something that might help her feel close to him again. Elias handed her the slim blue volume he'd saved behind the counter. Maya opened it carefully. Inside were photographs of lighthouses along the coast, including one that her grandfather had tended for 30 years. She looked up, eyes glistening. "How did you know?" Elias adjusted his spectacles. "I had help remembering." He gestured to the corkboard, now covered in cards. Maya walked over and read a few. Her smile returned. She reached into her bag and took out a small card. She wrote on it, "My grandfather used to say that lighthouses aren't there to chase away the dark. They're there to remind you that you're not alone in it." She pinned it beside the others. That evening, Elias closed the shop a little early. He sat in the window seat, the ginger cat on his lap, watching the street grow quiet. The card from Maya was the last thing he saw before he turned off the lamp. He didn't remember everything anymore. Some days were harder than others. But he had learned something. A memory doesn't have to live in one mind to be real. It can live in the pages of a book, in the cards on a corkboard, in the voices of people who gather in a small shop on a quiet street. The printed leaf was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who had ever found a home there, and somewhere, in a box behind the counter, a stack of index cards grew thicker, each one a small flame in the gathering dark. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more tales from Ted's Bookshelf. Sleep well.